I think this song would be apropos for what's going on with the Eagles offensive coordinator search. The land of confusion. Another name off the board. Mike Kafka is going to stay in Kansas City. Why has he made that decision, and who could be next? We'll get into that, some more football. Johnny Mac, Football at 4, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. The Sports Bash brought to you by Geico. You have a choice of ways you could save on car insurance, 800-947-AUTO, or online at geico.com. Stop by the Geico office nearest you. Our intrepid 97.3 ESPN Eagles and NFL insider John McMullen joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Johnny Mac, welcome back.
How are you, Mike? I was trying to save you on Twitter there.
What'd I do?
Trying to jump on it. I was driving home. If I would have been by the studio, I would have jumped on your microphone.
What happened? Were you talking about the Jeter conversation?
Yeah, the Jeter comes. 5 guys in the history of baseball have more hits than Derek Jeter. If he played baseball in Kalamazoo, where he was born, he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
I wasn't disagreeing that he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm saying the fact that the whole baseball unanimous thing, that people are going to be outraged if he's not unanimous. And in baseball, they're just, for whatever reason, they don't make you unanimous until, like, one guy, Rivera.
Yeah, Mariano was the first, and that was more, I talked to a baseball writer once who shall remain nameless. That was more, he called it an you-know-what tax. I can't say it on the radio. That had more to do with certain voters, like Bill Conlon, for instance. He would not vote anybody in on the first ballot. So the joke was if you had 95%, you were essentially a unanimous choice because you had a couple idiots who thought they were above the process. So unanimous or not, I don't think that matters. He's slam dunk Hall of Famer. There should have been a lot of unanimous choices.
No, that I agree with.
Before Mariano Rivera, but there weren't because of these, whatever term you want to use. But again, people putting themselves above the process. But slam dunk is slam dunk. That guy's a slam dunk.
All right. What's not a slam dunk is who's going to be helping Doug Pederson on game day calling plays here, because Mike Kafka. Now, the interesting part about this is not that Kafka is deciding to stay with the Chiefs. It's that the report was essentially that the Eagles were under the impression that Andy Reid wouldn't let him interview. Do you find that surprising?
Well, I think there's a little bit more to that. As I mentioned yesterday, it's not like the Eagles have to go through back channels to know what Andy Reid is thinking. They already knew whether they were going to have an opportunity to talk to Mike Kafka. So I think it has more to do with Andy saying, look, I don't want to lose you. You're my passing game coordinator. Eric's going to be a head coach relatively soon. You know my history. You're going to be the next offensive coordinator. They'll probably, as Jeff always says, they'll probably tweak his title, give him a raise as well, and know that he's going to be the next one touched by the hand of God, so to speak, and convinced him to stay. So I think it has more to do with that than Andy saying, no, you can't interview. Although if it came down to it, maybe he would have put his foot down. But I think the Eagles kind of know, because of the relationship they have with Andy Reid, it wasn't going to happen either way. So I think that is more of what went on.
Yeah. Well, you were under the same impression that Andy had blocked, who was it before, Spags, and felt bad about it and said he would do that again.
Yeah, he did. And you go back here to the year before the Eagles won the Super Bowl and they blocked John DeFilippo from taking the Jets offensive coordinator job. Talked about that quite a bit. And John wasn't happy with that. Probably worked out for him long term. He was able to come back. He got a raise, won a Super Bowl, was able to get a job calling plays, and then, he failed on his own twice. So, there are different paths, and as I said yesterday on the show, the best path to being a head coach in this league is probably be a coordinator under Andy Reid. So I think that part of it is a bigger thing than him saying, no, you can't interview. I don't think it ever got to that point. In fact, I know it never got to that point because the Eagles never formally requested permission because they do have a good relationship with Andy Reid. So they knew the landscape.
Yeah.
So once you know the landscape, you don't even ask.
All right. So obviously, where do they go from here? Is this pointing towards an in-house candidate, or is there somebody outside that's lurking? What's your intuition tell you about where this goes from here now?
Eric Rose available. It's looking more and more like they made a bad decision. And I should say, Doug didn't fire Mike Rowe. Didn't want to fire Mike Rowe. And they've gone through this process, and whether it's James Urban didn't want the job or the Eagles didn't like him, whether Graham Harrell didn't want the job, Eagles didn't like him, it's pretty clear they're going through pages. So we know, Mike, whoever it ends up being, whether it's Jim Caldwell, whether it's somebody of that nature, Marty Morningwig coming back, somebody of that nature, whether it's Press Taylor getting elevated, Deuce Staley getting elevated, it's not plan A at this point. The Eagles will spin it that way, and certain fans will buy it, but they didn't get what they wanted, and this is a Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman problem. And now you're talking about an arranged marriage with a third or fourth choice. That's what you're talking about. And, hey, it can work. I mean, Doug was the third choice. But it wasn't the plan, no matter what they say from this point moving forward.
Yeah, John, that's exactly what I was going to ask you, is do the Eagles have a problem here? And you bring up it's a Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman problem. What exactly is that problem? Is it a negative perception around the league from other coaches, or
Well, think about it. That's a good question, Ryan. And I'll tell you why. Because you think about it from a coaching perspective. What do you see here? If you're outside looking at this organization, people say, why wouldn't Mike Kafka want to come here for a promotion? Frank Reich has gotten. Why would he rather stay in Kansas City? Well, think about it from his perspective. He just saw a head coach go on a season-ending press conference. He was asked specifically regarding Mike Rowe and Carson Wallace as well. Are they going to be back? What did Doug say? You can pull up the transcript. Yes, they will be back. And the owner and the general manager usurped that thought process 24 hours later. So that's one part. You say, well, what's going on with this front office? And then the second part is the upheaval on this coaching staff for 2 consecutive years, even though they've made the playoffs. There's very few teams in the NFL that have made the playoffs 3 consecutive seasons. The Eagles are one of those teams, and they're constantly changing assistants. So if you're a coach, you notice that type of thing. You don't just go, oh, I'm going here. Eagles are great, this, that. You're looking at the owner, you're looking at the general manager, and you're looking at the upheaval and saying, what the heck is going on there? If you have other options, like James Urban did, like Mike Kafka does.
Is this going to catch up with them? Like you just said it, they've made the playoffs 3 straight years. They're coming off a Super Bowl from now 2017, but it hasn't really impacted them. But eventually, do you fear that it will? The changing of the coaches consistently.
Yeah, I think it will. And I think we have started that process. And we are into the process of, as I said, you're not winning a Super Bowl in 2017, 2018 and getting fired 2 seasons later after you've made the playoffs consecutive seasons. But you have now started the clock. I've talked about this a lot. You have started the scapegoating clock, and that insulates the head coach. If there's another underachieving season, if you don't make the playoffs next year, the head coach is on the hot seat. And if there's another season after that, the head coach is gone. We have started that process, whether people realize it or not.
Interesting take there, John McMullen at JF McMullen. It starts fast. And what is the message then that a guy like Harrell doesn't want the job? Like, is that a negative message around the league that, you know what, I'm not real interested? Like, that it seems that people are kind of backing away from this opportunity. And I say opportunity because you mentioned yesterday that, you know, you stay with Andy Reid, you have a better chance. I mean, Doug's been a head coach for 4 years. He has a head coach under his tree already. I mean, he got a guy on his tree, a head coaching job, Frank Reich. So what's to deter someone to say, if I coach for that guy, I can get a job?
Well, you get a job coaching for anybody. You just know there's almost a certainty with Andy Reid. I mean, his tree is so large and there's so many branches off it. As I said, it's more you use Eric Bieniemy for an example, and everybody has criticized the Rooney Rule, and it's kind of astonishing he hasn't got a head coaching job. And that's sort of the narrative with Andy Reid. It's surprising when you're in that position and you don't get a coaching job. So it's a little bit different. It's not people saying, I can't become a head coach. As you said, it's already been proven. Frank has done it. Jim has had 2 interviews. And his inability to get a head coaching job probably has more to do with his personality than anything concerning Doug Pederson. But as far as all the candidates, Urban's in a very good spot in Baltimore. I just mentioned Kafka's in a tremendous spot in Kansas City. So they're in great spots. The one you do look at is Graham Harrell. Why the heck isn't he taking this job?
Yeah.
Well, maybe he didn't get offered the job, number one. There's that possibility. I find it hard to believe the Eagles would have offered him the job. So I'm going to lean on that more than he turned it down. But if he turned it down, that's bad news. That's terrible news. This guy 2 years ago was at the University of North Texas. So that one would be, that would be the one where you say, what the heck is this guy doing that he doesn't want to be in this organization?
But
I don't know if that's necessarily
right. A far-fetched possibility could be maybe the kid felt he was in over his head.
Yeah, I doubt that, though. He's a former NFL quarterback, albeit a backup for a very short period of time. He was a high-level college quarterback. Guys like that tend to have confidence. They're not going to turn down opportunities. And that's another reason why I don't think he was offered the job, was probably, told we're going to go in a different direction, and they gave him the opportunity to say he pulled out. That's just what you do as sort of a tip of the cap to people who get interviews. You don't want to throw them under the bus. So I think, as I said, I don't think the Eagles offered him the job. I'm saying if they did, though, and he turned it down, then that's, a coach getting at their places saying something's going on in this front office. Maybe you don't want to be there. And that would be a bad sign.
Okay. Jim Caldwell, his name's kind of crept up, not by reports or anything, but because he decided to tell the Dolphins, I'm not going to come back there, but I do want to coach again. His name has been mentioned, about 10 days or so, but nothing imminent there. Yesterday, Mosher brought up Mike McCoy. We talked about Ben McAdoo. Is it someone that's a higher profile, veteran, former head coach that makes the most sense? Or is it someone that's in-house that makes the most sense?
Well, they've seen 2 different kind of, 3 really. You've had the veteran guys where you want to replicate the Frank Reich scenario, the young innovators, supposedly, which would be the Graham Harrell types, and then the guys the organization knows that they've been here before, and that would be Urban and Mike Kafka. So I think you've had 3 different classes of sort of candidates that you can put them in. it's not real clear because the Eagles haven't made it clear what type of offensive coordinator. As I said, there's been really two different aspects, either trying to duplicate Frank Reich and the veteran steady presence that can get Doug's ear, or to try to go with a young, innovative, new eyes type of presence. And the Eagles haven't been clear with what they want.
Any of those guys intriguing to you, though? I mean, it's like, you know what? I like this. I think this guy would be a good fit, or what his background would intrigue me of the veteran guys. Or do you think they just are better off staying in house?
I think they're better off staying in house because this is not. The head coach is the offensive coordinator. I don't know why people can't get this. The offense isn't changing. The head coach is here. He calls the plays. He game plans. It's his ship. It's his boat. He's doing it. The other guy is just and it happens all over this league. Whether you have an offensive-minded head coach or a defensive-minded head coach, the other guy's essentially in charge of the other side of the football. So, from a coordinator standpoint, Jim Schwartz is a heck of a lot more important than Frank Reich was or Mike Groh was, because Doug is here. Mm-hmm. This is Doug's offense. This is going to continue to be Doug's offense. It did not change when Frank Reich left. It's not going to change now that Mike Groh has left as well. It will continue to be Doug Pederson's offense. So in a lot of ways, to me, they're going to get a name. And it's not going to matter that much. And in that type of situation, I give the head coach what he wants and what he feels most comfortable with, which is why I wouldn't have fired Mike Groh.
Well, the argument I guess you could make for one of these other guys, if you bring in Mike McCoy, you would say, hey, you're not calling plays, but he could help. Hey, we did this with Phillip Rivers. This worked really well. I can help implement that. Or, everybody's had some sort of, McAdoo worked with Aaron Rodgers. Hey, this is what we used to do with Rodgers. I think I can help Carson Wentz and put some plays in like that. So I guess you're looking for someone who can really add some more depth to your playbook.
Well, the playbook is already pretty deep, and that's the ironic part. I always joked about, early in Doug's coaching career here, people would, you remember that first year, Mike, and people would say Doug's not that smart. And I would always say, Chip Kelly is the guy with the little tiny play card, and Doug's playbook is, the menu from the Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah.
So the dumb guy had the big menu of plays. That's just the philosophy. Same thing if you bring in Graham Harrell. He's the guy running the simple offense. Doug's the guy running the West Coast, integrating spread concepts, doing what Andy Reid does. He's the guy with the big playbook. They already have that. And if you go back to the most famous play in modern Eagles history, what is it? Philly Special. Who came up with that? Press Taylor. Didn't come up with it. Stole it from the Chicago Bears. He stole it from college football. Stole it from high school football. But my point is, everybody steals from everybody in this league. Doug has always had a system where his offensive assistants, that's part of their job, is to call other film to come up with ideas and concepts and filter them through the offensive coordinator and says, this might work, this might work, this might work. And then Doug makes the decision. That was the way it was set up with Frank Reich. It was the way it was set up with Mike Groh. It'll be the way it's set up with the next guy, whoever that next guy is. And all those coaches, all those assistants, all those position coaches will have a collaborative effort to go find and go call plays from every type of offense you can imagine. So, I mean, the word I keep coming up to is overrated. And I've said from the start, this is more about a public-facing company trying to appease its customers than anything else. This decision is not that important. It's just not.
I would tend to agree with you as well, by the way. The fact that the offensive coordinator here, not a lot of people really know what that guy does. So it's hard to quantify what he means.
Yeah, well, I mean, he calls the plays. And until he doesn't call the plays and he says, I want to become a CEO coach and I'm going to let somebody else take over this aspect of the job, then it would become very important. Now, it's not that important.
Yeah.
It really isn't. And, if you want to talk about defensive coordinator, that's really important. And it's the same way everywhere. It's not just in Philadelphia. Pick a team. And Andy Reid, it's not really that important for Eric Bieniemy or Mike Kafka or anybody else because they're not the ones calling the plays. Steve Spagnuolo is very important.
All
That's
right.
just the way the NFL works.
We'll keep our eye on it, see what happens next. Obviously, Senior Bowl this week, got all that happening. Draft stuff will be happening. Super Bowl, we'll dive into the game a lot more next week from Miami. We'll get John's thoughts on everything football. Football at 4 every day here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.
And John McMullen, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.